Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another channel map. Today we're talking about the month of July 2021. And of course, I've got to recap June. It was a very productive month where a lot of things happened, including what feels like a very consistent, never ending heat wave. But I'm surviving. Even Canada is mostly surviving. So you know what that means. I guess they had like a ridiculous amount of heat compared to down here. But it's been ridiculous everywhere, I think. It's just the whole planet is experiencing summer simultaneously. So, what shall we be experiencing in the month of July? To answer that question, we'll take a look at what we accomplished in the month of June. We obviously had some serious updates to Cosmonarchy. We seem to be pushing it further and further towards that final stage of development in Brood War, and I will talk a little bit about that in the RTS plans section. But we also, towards the tail end of this month, worked on game state updates to Fraud Strike. I have a couple of short videos on the channel showing off some of those, and you'll be able to experience them yourself if you decide to join us for some CSGO game nights with the modified weapons. I think it's quite a departure from what you're used to. Should be another breath of fresh air in that respect, as the game has certainly grown a bit stale with the weapons that we had previously had. And we always had fun, but there were ways that we could probably get a little bit more out of the experience, and I think I've been able to, generally speaking, get to that level, and I'm quite pleased with that overall. Obviously, that will continue to be iterated upon, but it didn't take too long to get into, so it's not like it's a massive time sink. It's just a nice way to experience some new, more fun, more entertaining things when we do decide to hop on for some game nights every weekend. Of course, Cosmonarchy's game nights themselves have made a triumphant return, and we seem to be much more stable. The bugs that are coming up seem to be like one in every few games by comparison to before, and we actually haven't experienced too many during our Fraudarchy game nights. However, that is probably just luck. Hopefully we remain lucky. You never know. There was a bit of a focus on Cosmonarchy scenarios in the month of June, although none of them have been released bar one, which was UED Commander's birthday map. And that particular map was definitely, I think, pretty entertaining, pretty interesting, and people tended to have a pretty fun time with it. With AI improvements down the line, theoretically, that fun will only continue. And the scenarios themselves are going to continue development as well. We also released the Mapping Tutorial Series Part 2, the 2 versus 2 edition, and I actually promptly started production on Part 3. I actually have 2 sessions already recorded as of the time of recording this one, so that's just been a pretty consistent endeavor, and I feel like we're really starting to figure out the format for that, so I can go and proceed with confidence and also with pace, so that hopefully the videos don't take about a month to produce while I'm also working on other things. We had AI Castovers come back, we had Street Dog Podcast come back, and we also had Elo Heaven reach its conclusion as my co-host Vu over on the other channel was no longer interested in participating in the talk show. He wanted to pursue more serious analysis, but also didn't necessarily want to watch every game. So he basically wanted to be able to be confident in what he was saying for the analysis, and didn't necessarily want to be giving out the sort of lower scope takes that he was more or less forced to, because obviously who has time to watch every game of Counter-Strike now? So a totally sympathetic position, and one that is going to be, it's probably going to improve both of us, actually, because obviously it'll allow him to focus on content he wants to focus on. I was able to focus on a bunch of content for this channel, and of course for the RTS production more broadly speaking, which obviously meant that I took a bit of a break from the side channel content as well. On the RTS side of the spectrum, however, I'm pretty sure we've got some very exciting plans for you. So in the month of July, I do want to ship a few more Cosmonarchy patches and enter that final development stage. The final development stage of Cosmonarchy looks like this. Essentially, we want to be able to, I say we, mostly Veek and myself, but also the, DF producing art and so on. We want to be able to focus on the new enterprises of working on Antikythera and games within Antikythera, which is of course the engine that we're going to be working on. And I'll get a little bit more into that in a moment, but because we want to be able to focus on that, we have to bring Cosmonarchy in Brood War to some sort of state of stability, and we would call it like end of life in a way where, we're not like pulling support, we'll still update it and patch it if fixes to issues that are reported are possible. But it's becoming more and more frustrating and more limited in what we can actually do in order to bring about new features. For example, one of the new features that we want to include in an upcoming larger patch is the selection extender, and the sheer number of things you need to do just to get that done, which seems like a comparably minor change to some of the stuff that's already been done, the work required is pretty astronomical. And the same is true for things like the limit extender for the in-game units and in-game bullets. Theoretically, all of this stuff was supposed to be a lot easier than it was, but we always ran into some roadblock down the line. I'm not saying it'll never happen in Brood War, but it seems likely that if we're unable to bring it over the line in our next couple of attempts, it'll just be something that we work on in the new engine and liberate ourselves from the unfortunate chains of the Brood War engine. And we've done a lot of really impressive things. We've made a very satisfactory RTS experience, and it's a prototype, and it's a tech demo, and it's not stable, and it's not what it could be, but it is a nice little, when I say prototype, it's almost like a proof of concept, and this is how I describe Cosmonarchy to people, is the proof of concept of what will become the de facto premier RTS experience, the legitimate RTS experience, one that I think has never actually been delivered upon hitherto. So it sounds like that's really impressive and requires a lot of work, but realistically speaking, it just requires you to commit to some basic design principles and be unrelenting in your confidence going forward into that. And also being willing to experiment with things that are a little bit more, this way or that way. Things like the way that you balance races or units, or the way that you integrate mechanics. Those can all vary in wildly different ways, but they have to be the same in one way, and that is, of course, a commitment to allowing player skill expression to win the day, essentially. So that focus on a competitive nature, even if we're not talking about multiplayer content expressly, is what's going to carry us through, and it's what carried Cosmonarchy through, where we weeded out mechanics that didn't reward actual skill and didn't drive players to compete with one another and alongside one another as well as against one another. All of those things have been beneficial, and even though it is just a proof of concept, just a tech demo, it's still probably the best RTS experience I've ever played. And yeah, you could say I'm biased, but I'm also very, very critical of my own work, let alone of the work of other people. So I think maybe I'll leave the viewer to decide how satisfactory Cosmonarchy is compared to the crowd. And I guess if you have a title that you like better, maybe make a case for it in the comments, because maybe I'll get something out of playing it myself, assuming I haven't already played it. That being said, aside from the Cosmonarchy patches to smooth out those issues, add more audio visuals, fix up the AI a little bit more, and maybe add a couple of more features, a couple of more units, we will be entering into that final stage of development where all I'm doing is these audio visual passes and improving readability. And besides that, in the month of July, the plan is to have more scenarios, more maps in general. And I am going to focus on not just the mapping tutorial series, which will include a scenario map. That's the next episode, actually. The point of the scenario focus is to provide single player content so that people who aren't necessarily interested in, loreless, storyless Melee want some first party single player content for Cosmonarchy. They get to see that as well. I think that's a integral part of the proof of concept element, so that you can see what a competitive, an RTS with competitive design in mind, what that would feel like to play in the single player context. Because again, we're mostly going off of like a shell of what is actually possible, of what is actually going to be the end result, a year or two down the line when we're ready to release the proper game. All of these things are proofs of concept and tech demos, but even a tech demo of the ideal single player RTS experience is still worth having, and still better than what we've had hitherto. So a lot of that is my main focus for the month of July, alongside those patches to improve the general Melee game state. Being able to have this map-specific AI code and whatnot is pretty important as well. And I did mention the mapping tutorial series. That's obviously a focus. And aside from that, I've been hinting at it all log long, all channel map long. Antikythera development makes a lot of sense at this point. It's time to rid ourselves of the limitations of Brood War. It's time to experiment with making a smaller scale 2D game and figuring out where we go from there, and then exploring the brave new world of being able to make our own products wholesale from scratch without relying on other things, other people. And theoretically, if the first game ends up working out well, that might even open the door for us to make additional titles via the funding secured by releasing the first game and having it actually be somewhat successful. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But Antikythera itself is where we start. We make the engine, then we make the game out of the engine, and we'll see where that goes. People keep saying, the doubters, I call them, the action verbers, they keep saying, there's no way you make an engine in 6 months to a year. No way. How could you possibly do it? Everybody else says it's too hard. Well, that's probably because everybody else just hasn't even bothered trying, to be honest. I will remain cocky and cocksure and cock in general until I see reason to doubt, and I have no reason to doubt currently. So maybe that's overconfidence, overcockfidence, you could even say. But I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's fine. I'm pretty sure we got this, guys. Let's talk about the channel plans, specifically the channel plans for this channel. This is, of course, where the hub of your AI castovers, your mapping tutorial series, and your Street Dog podcasts are going to be. I might actually continue the DADCAW series sometime soon. I've been thinking about topics where I could riff on for about 15, 20 minutes. Unfortunately, nothing has really immediately come to mind. I've just been very heavily busy with other things. But I might talk a little bit about FPS design for guns and stuff. I think that'll probably be the topic of a Street Dog podcast as well, just because I've been tooling around with the Counter-Strike weapons and trying to come up with novel ideas and comparing them to how drab and pointless a lot of the weapons are by default. So that's obviously an area of relative expertise for Dynamo, not the Counter-Strike side of things, but the weapons in games like Doom and Quake. So I'm sure we could have a fruitful and interesting and in-depth conversation there where we could just talk concepts and talk about how the tools can work there. And I also want to have some general game design topics that I discuss. I'm not sure if I save those for the Crow Pill or if I save those for a more in-depth by design episode or something like that, but either way, we might see some other kinds of videos, but the mainstay are going to be AI castovers. You already saw 2 of them towards the tail end of June in quick succession. You're going to see a lot more, maybe about 2, 3 a week. I don't want to overload people with it, but it really depends on how fast the AI is progressing and how many maps I have to do castovers of without them being stale. The mapping tutorial series, obviously I've been hard at work on the scenario version of that video, so that part 3 should be coming, I would say within the first half of this month. It looks like my progress is being, met very well, but it is a much larger map than before, and it involves voice acting and script writing, so I'm not going to commit to a timeline beyond in the month of July. And then, yeah, Street Dog Podcast already name dropped those. Dynamo and I's schedule theoretically should align a little bit more often now, so you'll be seeing more of those. On the second channel, I still want to reach out to some people for semi-pro interviews and pick the brains of some people. I probably will expand outside of the network of just Counter-Strike people and try to talk to people who are interested in, designing games from a competitive standpoint or something like that. I guess most of my game design related interviews have been done using the CSGO series first-person mapper, which also included talking to the people from Black Mesa, which isn't strictly CSGO related. So there's already a bit of a precedent there. But I wouldn't mind doing that in the semi-pro context one-on-one. We'll just have to wait and see where those go. That being said, aside from the interviews or potential interviews, as I still have to secure some people who would be interested in having a sit down, who would interest me, of course, as well, there are map analyses in the CSGO space that I might be interested in pursuing. I'm definitely somebody who wants to continue adding support or providing support for the mapping community. I'm always on the hunt for new maps to play during Fraud Strike, so it makes a lot of sense. The question does become, at what point do we run out of quality maps to take a look at? It does seem like there are a decent number of them that have had effort put into them, but I do tend to have a bias towards maps that are either made or updated within somewhat recent history, because the idea is that my feedback can theoretically be useful to the developers themselves, instead of it being like, a learning experience for people who are making their maps, and then they look at this, my breakdown of some map that maybe they've never seen or they have seen and played a little bit of or whatever, but they can learn and abstract there. I don't just want to help those people. I do want to help those people, but I also would like to help the actual developers of these maps. And in a super ideal world, I would be able to, come in and hopefully encourage them by virtue of them seeing people on Fraud Strike, for example, playing their maps. By virtue of seeing that, it would be ideal to provide some element of, just something so that they can see there's feedback and interaction with their content, and maybe they decide to update it and improve it, or make my secret dream is for them to make Fraud Strike specific versions of the maps that have, for one, more spawn points, for another, like maybe some tweaked geometry or tweaked elements to encourage large amounts of bots pouring out through areas, or interesting rotations or whatever. And yeah, we would just have to see where that leads us. Anyhow, I think that does it for our channel map. We do have the siren of an airplane flying overhead, and you may have noticed my dog in the background. If not, you can rewind the video and watch the dog the whole time. So bark, bark, motherfucker, and I'll see you next time. Don't die.